about 3 years ago, the Lord really spoke to my wife and myself and said, I've been in ministry as a pastor for almost 20 years then, and the Lord called us out into the marketplace, and I didn't know what, where, how exactly. Just remember going to Neville's office and saying to him, I have to resign. He said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to go work. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. And I could just see his whole face was like, is he mal? And I'm like, I literally, he couldn't understand it. Maybe I understood only 50%. But we just realized that God is busy really talking very strongly about being in the marketplace. So the Lord spoke to us out of Joseph's life journey and said to us, it's time that you go and hand out bread in Egypt. Whatever you've learned with working with people over the last 20 years, it's time for you to go and work in the marketplace. And I remember they said, but Marno, who's going to preach in your place? I said, man, the church has a lot of good preachers, and they really do have. It's time that we infiltrate what God has for us. So in that journey, I actually visited Goucher one day. It was actually quite funny. And Gideon and my paths would cross, and then they would go away, and then we'll see one another again, and over 15 years. And so I was visiting Goucher one day, and he was saying, hey, I want to show you something on my emails. And as he opened his emails, the email just above said Gideon Galloway. And I looked and said, Gideon Galloway? How do you know Gideon Galloway? He looks at me and says, do you know him? I said, yeah, I know him well. And I made a comment which made him really stressed about Gideon. Not a negative one, but I've told it to him. I just don't want to go into that detail. But anyway, and I could see Goucher was like, fear struck him. It's like, Marno, this is the thing we're praying about. Should we give them 150 million rand and what? I said, what do you want to, depends what you want to do. I mean, he's good at losing money and he's good at making money. So what do you want him to do? He said, no, he's going to start insurer. I said, no, well, then I guess you've got the right guy. So our roads crossed again, and we came together, and I said to him, well, Gideon, I'm resigning from the church. And he was so excited. I thought everybody else in the church was like sad about it. He's like, yes, you're resigning from the church. Come, you must come and help me. And we started the first month. I saw 5 people, and then 10, and then 20, and it just kept going. And now there's so much work here. It's just not funny. So we started off with culture. So I'm going to just talk you through a couple of philosophies and things how we see things and why we put an emphasis on that. So we just say it takes a world-class company to change the world. If you want to really change the world and make an impact in the world, you've got to be world-class. So one of the measurements I very often use when we work with teams inside is when they're not happy with their performance, I just basically ask the managers one question. I'd say, well, is that person delivering world-class service to a client? So it's just one of those measurements we try and install in our thinking to be and become world-class. The second thing we realized with culture is you can't buy a brand and you can't purchase a priceless culture. You have to build it. So what we usually say in any organization, I saw it in the church, I see it in companies and many of the other clients we work with, is that people think you can just buy a culture. You can't buy a culture. So there's what we call a culture by design, or there's a default culture. A default culture is when you do nothing. Then it just is what it is. When you leave everything, you leave everyone to just do what they do, you've got a default culture. And that's where your problems usually lie, and in processes and in thinking. And that's where we usually get involved. So listen, you have to design what you want. If you want to change the world, if you want to reach the world, if you want to do something specific, define what that vision is. For Gideon, he knows, and we also know, we're also discovering it as we go. But we know we want to touch and change, influence the world. Those years ago in that Christian camp that he was on, which he referred to, where I baptized him, I can't remember what I said, but I spoke something about world evangelism and stuff like that and how to reach the world. And he said, at that moment, God just said to him, that stuff Marno is talking about, you've got to finance that one day. And whatever our thinking was at that stage, we now see something of that, not knowing 15, 16 years later, this is the way it's going to get together, and the shareholders that came on board, and that's a story of its own, how God just did that. So one of the very famous sayings, of course, in culture is to say that organizational culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. A couple of guys have quoted it, but we know, people, that we do all of these. We do great execution, we do great performance, we do change management, we try and grow, we have innovation in everything we do. But we've seen so often, if you have a culture that's not highly efficient, you can plan, you can change, you can do whatever you want, you can train your people, you can put them through processes and leadership or whatever. If the culture is not healthy and it's not it's not causing growth in the individuals. Culture is just by far stronger than strategy. I've done a lot of strategic planning sessions for companies, and we realize that sometimes you almost know, listen, the strategy is not the thing that's just that just shows you where you're going. But if your culture is destructive, the people is not in a good and a healthy space, you won't actually get to what you're planning and what I believe God has for you. God is calling you to do. So Gideon has a great, I've asked him this question many times, Gideon, define culture. And I'll ask him a month or two later, Gideon, what is culture for you? Gideon, what is... So I continue to probe him with that question so that we can define and redefine so it really embeds in our hearts how strong we feel about culture. And I love Gideon's definition. This is actually his. He says culture is what makes us come to work every day. But for Gideon and for us, it's basically saying, if you don't want to go to work tomorrow, something is wrong. If you don't have a desire to go to your office tomorrow and go and work at what you're busy working at, something is wrong. So culture, when culture is what it should be, is what makes you go to work tomorrow. It's that passion that drives you to fulfill that purpose and calling that God has for you in the business world. Just carry on to the next one. So I spoke a little bit about that. You either have a culture by design or you have a counterculture. So when you enter there at the door, you would see at the wall, our 7 values are there. So we're very strong on those values. The values are the glue that unites everyone and everything. Values are those things. I think Stefan asked me earlier, how did we came up with that? And we actually, at that stage, when we defined the values, the company was about 150 people, and we're now at 700. Where are we now? 700. It was about 150 people. We took all 150 people through the boardroom in groups of 15. I stood there for a day or two, took all of them through a session, say, please write on a paper what is your personal values and what is the values you would desire to have in a company to work for. So when we chose that 7, as a management team, we went away and we brainstormed it and we defined those 7. But we had every single employee at that stage involved in defining the why. Because you want everybody to buy into the values. They want to come to work and say, you know, I said something about, you'll see there, I think one of the values is together we can. So that engulfs everything about teamwork, working together, helping one another, helping a person next to you. So everything is into that value. So anybody who said anything on that, we could say, you know, your values, the way you expressed it is in that specific value. So we defined those 7, and we actually said to ourselves, we'll revisit them annually, and we think they'll change. They'll 10 to 1 change. It's okay, they change, because we're also discovering ourselves. We're getting to know ourselves better as an organization. Just go to the next one. This is one of the ones we have, is fun with a little bit of madness. Okay, so that's why we do cash cubes and these things. And those of you who came in, you saw on the sales floor this evening we had a bull there. I don't know, did you see that bull, cow type of a thing there, rodeo thing? And we make sure you have to have fun while you work. There's a little bit of madness and everything. The reason is this, people, I really believe if whatever God calls you for, you should enjoy doing it. If you don't enjoy the journey, if there's not a passion and a love for what you do, you must have fun while you do it. So just go to the next one. We did a survey recently. I did a survey, and one of the things we focus on is how to get individuals highly engaged. So we try and get our people as engaged as possible. So 91% of our employees indicated that King Prize is a better place to work than their previous employer. And we think the other 9% were still staying with their mothers. We're not sure. So that's just what we think. Okay, so what 91% said, working here is better than the place they came from, which is an indicator for us where our culture is at. Is it good? Is it better? Are we working hard on it? And so on. Yeah, we love what we do here. So there's resilience, there's EQ, there's leadership. There's a lot of training programs, and through a lot of the coaching that I personally do here and training that we do here, there's lots of different topics. But for us, the biggest container of resilience, leadership, EQ, and all the things you want, communication and things like that, they're all in there. But we funnel that all into what we call the biggest container to grasp all of that is what we call culture. So culture for us is the way we speak, the way we think, the way we do. You see culture in the way people speak, think, and act. So those are quickly the 3 indicators we keep looking for. So very often when we work with teams, where you can hear when the thinking is not right. You can hear when the thinking is like, oh, we won't be able to do this, and oh, we can't do that, and excuses and excuses, excuses. So we We try and do all our training, and we're still busy with that continually, but to build a resilient culture that's really strong. Just going to quickly say, this was Berson Deloitte's HR result last year, or the previous 2014, where they said worldwide, the biggest thing Deloitte is at this moment saying should be worked on in any organization is driving engagement, having highly engaged people, and keeping retention. And the number one thing they think you should do is the one right at the top, is assessing and improving corporate culture. So we've built a tool that can sort of measure culture. We're continually defining it, but we've got a tool that we can measure culture. And one of the things we want to do is eventually is to say, listen, we'll give you the King Prize tool to measure your culture. We can measure it for you, we can tell you where it is, and then tell you accordingly where you should change and shift and build that thing. Gallup goes as far to say, in America they did this study, this is quite a high figure. They range, but the lowest is at 75%, okay? Between 75 and 87% of people, they, according to their studies, label as disengaged in their workplace. In other words, those are people that go to work, they do what is expected of them, but they don't engage personally with their own mentality, their own thinking, their own innovation and things like that. They don't engage. So if you sit with a workforce, if you sit with 3 out of 4 people that's not highly engaged, how can you be effective? That's basically the thing. So they work out, I think there's something like $13,000 per disengaged person per year. So it comes to $500 billion of money lost in America alone. That's their study. This was Gallup's study. Just go to the next one. So just to give you an idea, and this is just explaining to you, and I'll now explain to you why we focus in so strongly on a kingdom culture and believe what God wants to do, just that you understand why we work on this. So according to Jim Stengel, they rated that companies that put with a higher sense of purpose. If you know what the purpose is of your organization, if you just have a much higher sense and you align your company according to that purpose or that calling that God has for you, outperform other companies with 400%, and this small little thing says, in shareholder returns. And there's a study they did with the Stengel top 50 companies and the Fortune 5 S&P 500 companies. So outperform them with 400%, just focusing on something like fixing your purpose or your calling. So there's quite a fantastic piece of study. This says that companies who centered their business on a culture of improving people's lives, there's the key, improving people's lives, had a growth rate triple that of their competitors. So if you have a focus to say, how can I make my employees better? How can I make sure that they as individuals function better? Those are the results. Just go to another slide. We've got lots of these. This is the last one of our stats. We've got lots of these stats that we went through. So Harvard Business Review said, if people are happy, that's just a different word for engaged. When people are happy at work and they're engaged at work, Harvard Business Review says they're 300% more innovative. 300% more innovative. 44% higher retention, says Gallup. Martin Seligman, who's like the father of positive psychology and lots of positive studies, 37% increase in sales, 31% increase in productivity. That's a Greenberg study. Harvard Business Review says 125% less burnout, 66% fewer sick leave, and 51% less turnover in companies. So there's just a lot of this. There's even this is studies done over 15 years with companies and organizations. Okay, let's go to the next. I think I want to get to the stories. Here's a couple of stories. Let's rather get to this. Stefan and everybody was sharing earlier tonight about what's the stories inside your company. So when I came here, Gideon said, well, Marno, work with the people. I think it was sort of simple as that. I don't know if it was a very complicated conversation we had. He said, do what you do, help my people, and so on. So our philosophy is this. When you help individuals to be healthy and whole, healthy, whole individuals make better decisions, treat people around them better, treat clients better, causes less conflict, and you can carry on with the list. So our focus is to focus on individuals. So people often ask me, so Marno, like what exactly do you do? And it's, even after 3 years, it's a little bit difficult to explain it in one term. So like, Gideon calls me the culture evangelist. Some people call me executive coach. It's basically very simplistic. It's helping an individual functioning as close as possible into that God-given calling and purpose, being whole, being healthy, and have a right mindset. So inside here, Cecile that you saw earlier tonight, she runs Gideon's diary and mine as well, and she would every now and then come to me and says, Marno, please, quickly, you've got a problem today. So a while ago, she ran to me, she says, we've got somebody who wants to commit suicide. She says, no, she's going to end her life today. I said, no, quickly, send her to me. And so took that person, started walking around with that person specifically. And I mean, there's something of everything in this office. There's 700 people here, of which, I don't know, 15%, 20% maybe attends a church, if it's that high, really. So you work with something of everything. So this becomes, like Gideon said, this becomes our church. This becomes our community. This becomes the place where we work with people. So we worked with her, helped her, restored everything. She's at a much better place. The moment we restored whatever was causing that problem, and that got healed, her productivity started picking up again. So I could go to her general manager every now and then and say, listen, I'm still working with her with this and this and this. How's the productivity do? I can literally ask, I can measure her wholeness on her productivity. As long as her productivity stays low, I know she's not in a good space. She's not in a good place. So when I work with her, everything gets better and her productivity picks up. Then you know, okay, something's happened. Her mind is getting clearer. She's making better decisions. She's becoming motivated. We've had a couple of marriages that same thing. Cecile would run to me and say, Marno, please, can you work with so-and-so? They think they're going to have a divorce. So-and-so found out her husband was cheating on her last night, and she's in an absolute state to this morning. And I just say, okay, clear the diary quickly, send them to me, send them to me. So we've had a couple of cases like that, literally a couple of them, where we've managed to get those marriages restored. Every now and then, some of those would be the husband or wife doesn't work here, just one of the parties works here. And I would say to him, listen, is it okay if I drive to your husband? Can I go and speak to him? Or will he be willing to come and see me? And I said, just don't tell him it's counseling. Just tell him it's a leadership coaching session. And they go, no, they're in for that. So ladies out here, husbands are easier to go for a coaching session than a berading, okay, counseling. They don't like that word. So we've had great success. We've had a couple of marriages now saved. That was on the brink of really being finished. We had a very traumatic session here one day. Something happened in the offices, and it was a massive disaster. Somebody from outside came in and caused some havoc right in our foyer. It was a mess. I don't want to go into the details. But a lot of people had to save somebody there and jump on one guy, and it was a groot gemors. Eventually they said to me, I said, listen, can I get everybody that was involved in that whole thing, can I get them all in a room? And let's just do a post-traumatic sort of debriefing session with them. So it's some of these big guys. In that session, I realized, but some of them was actually somewhere in their life served some jail time. I also realized they've got no context of belief. Not Muslim, no Islam, no Buddhism, no Christianity, no nothing. And in that conversation, some of them like beforehand said, listen, do we really have to go into this session? We have to listen to this rubbish, for some of their words. They said, you know, we've seen people killed on the street, and we've been in gangs, fights, and stuff like that. This is okay. And I just went in there, I thought, Lord, just help us with this session. I don't know what to do, but let's just start this thing. Let's see what happens. Long story short, at the end of that session, I had guys sitting there crying. We were about 7 in that group. I think, Marie, you were helping that day. And we sat there, and all of a sudden, that thing turned in such a way. The next moment, I said to my wife, it's like the presence of the Lord just filled that room. I sat there, and I realized God is here now. God is busy working with these guys. And the next time I said to them, I said, do you realize what you did today or yesterday? I said, you risked your life to save a colleague's life yesterday. And you know, it's nothing less than what God did with his son Jesus. Jesus came to earth to risk his life, to give his life, to save our lives. And you yesterday put your life on the line to save somebody's life. And I could see many of them was looking like, wow. I said, do you realize that I don't know what you believe? I said to them, I don't know what you believe. and what God you believe, but do you realize that God used you yesterday? The way He used His Son Jesus. God used every single one of you. And those guys were sitting there, and they were all of a sudden, and the presence of the Lord was there, and I just realized, right now God is speaking to them, placing them in that position of saying, you know that God used you. I don't care what you believe. God still used you. And eventually, as I finished, I thought, well, only thing that still must happen is we need to pray. And I think then somebody actually put, I don't know, was it you, Marie? Was it somebody there said, Marno, could you just pray for us? And I was just about to say, can I pray for you? And they said, please just pray for us. And that session ended up, and I said, listen guys, we did a group session now. If any of you want to come and speak to me afterwards, please just come out. And the biggest guy of them all came out afterwards. He said, just can I see you? And that resulted in a couple of sessions even later. Tremendous thing that God did there. There was a lady in our sales department. She was earning about 6,000 rand, 5,000 rand. Not with, we employed her. She did so well, took her to the sales department, and she went from 5,000 or 6,000 rand a month, and she earned, help me, I think her record was taking home 56,000 rand. Am I right? It was roughly there. So that was what she took home. So what she did with that money, she started saying, well, if this is what the company could do for me, I want to give back. So she started putting together food parcels, taking it to the poor over weekends. She started reading, she said, I went and interviewed her. She doesn't know who I am. And I said, so what do you do with your money now? She says, no, I took it to the church. We make food parcels for the poor in the church. I asked the church to help us to distribute. I go and buy clothes, and we distribute it, and things like that. Another testimony, where is Wynand? Wynand's there at the back. He's the head of our legal. He's a procureur. So this is a sign that the end times is close, is when the attorneys start telling stuff in the church, and they help us. We know the second coming is close. We had a church leadership group come here one day because they wanted to come and see. I think, Wynand, you invited them. That's right, you invited them. And Gideon said to me, hey, Marno, there's a bunch of church guys coming today. It's your background. Why don't you just sit in the meeting? I said, okay, I'll just sit there. I don't know what to say. Eventually, that meeting went 2-3 hours. Wynand, you took them through the tour. We spoke a lot. It ended up that those church leaders, at the end of those 3 hours, the one guy's remarks was, this was the most significant meeting I've had in all my years of ministry. This was the main thing, because they were looking at the toys and these things. They thought that's exciting. I said, no, that's not the story. It's not that we have all these funny things, and yes, that creates a vibe. But you have to go back to your calling. Everything exists because of what God said to Gideon years ago, of what God did in his life years ago, of fixing that calling. And that's what you have to do. Church leader, business leader, doesn't matter, but fix the purpose of God in your life. When you fix that, you know what God has called you, that's where everything starts. What's happened quite a lot is, a couple of times, let's say quite a couple of times, I would have sessions with people, and I would actually have dreams of them a couple of days prior to that. And they would come into a session, we have a coaching session, and they'd say, Marno, I had some really bad news, this, that, and the other happened. And I'd say, yeah, you know, it's interesting. I actually dreamt that like 2-3 nights ago. And you must remember, I work with many of the guys, even in here, Gideon will tell you, it doesn't mean they're Christian. So it's, you know, you have to choose your wording quite carefully sometimes. But the way God has spoken to so many people through dreams and visions inside here is just amazing. So we have one guy that we have really close to. He told me in his very first session, I can't use the descriptive language because there's believers here, but he told me in very clear language, Marno, I just don't believe nothing. Okay. Last week he said to me, hey Marno, this is like after a year and a half working with him, every time a little bit. He said to me, I'm going to a church on Sunday, but I think it's a funny church. So I won't mention the church's name now. I said, hey, that's fantastic. He says, yeah, but I'm scared of those stuff. I said, oh, that's okay. I understand that. I said, but just go there, and whatever you experience, just come and ask me what it means and why they do this, that, or the other. And I said to Wynand earlier today, I said, you know what, I think we're very close to getting that guy in the kingdom. He's close. He's asking the right questions now. He's close. He's seeing the things and so on. So what we do is we have a post-traumatic growth approach in everything we do, which basically says whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. If you go through whatever stress, trauma, problems, what can you learn from that? And how can we get people closer? So through the way God is just using this at the moment, I've become so aware the last 3 years, inside this environment and maybe also other companies, is that calling that God has in the marketplace. And I can just speak of that maybe firsthand because that's our journey. That's been our journey beyond myself and journeying with Gideon and the team and journeying with, there's Ludwig sitting there and a couple of the guys I've been journeying with for quite a while. But to experience that journey, just being an old guy out there, being there when something happens and knowing you're just salt and light. You're just there when the trouble is there, and you've got the answers for God's kingdom in that place. But and I think this last year with life work, I'm just so glad to see a program that helps to equip the business people for that specific calling that God has on your lives. Right. Thank you very much.